Come closer for a second. I'm going to say this quietly, because it isn't the kind of thing you shout. You already knew. That's the part nobody prepares you for. Not the knowing itself, the loneliness of it. You knew something was different long before you had a single word to explain it. You knew when the room got quiet, and you didn't. You knew when everyone laughed, and you felt something underneath the laughter that nobody else seemed to notice. You knew when you smiled and agreed and went along with it, and then sat in your car afterward with the engine off, hands still on the wheel, wondering why you felt like a visitor in your own life. You sensed 9 things, maybe more, but 9 that kept coming back, and you couldn't name a single one of them. That's what we're doing today. Not teaching you something new, putting words on something old. Something that's been in you since before you could speak. My name is George. I've been walking with people through this for a long time now, and I want to tell you something before we go any further. The fact that you couldn't name it doesn't mean it wasn't real. A child feels hunger long before he learns the word for it. The hunger was never waiting on the vocabulary. Neither was this. Now, there are 3 layers to what I'm about to walk you through, and I want to be honest with you about that up front, because most people never get past the first one. The first layer is what people see, what they say about you, what they've been saying since you were small. The second layer is what's actually underneath it, the real mechanism, the thing that's been driving all of it. And the third layer is what God was doing the entire time, while you thought you were just struggling. We're going all the way down, all 3. Layer 1, what they see. Let's start where everyone else starts. On the surface. The first thing you sensed, you feel too much. And you've been told so. You've heard it your whole life, in 100 different tones of voice. You're too sensitive. You take things too personally. You overthink everything. Why can't you just let it go? And you tried. God knows you tried. You practiced not caring. You rehearsed indifference in the mirror. You learned to say it's fine with a straight face, while something in your chest was screaming. But it didn't take. It never takes. Because what they're calling sensitivity isn't a defect in your wiring, it's the wiring itself. You are an instrument tuned to a frequency they can't hear, and then blamed for hearing it. The second thing, people tell you things they don't tell anyone. This one is strange, and you've never quite made peace with it. Strangers open up to you. The woman in the grocery line at 11 at night, the one with the cart half empty and the tired eyes, who suddenly tells you her mother is dying. The coworker who's never said more than good morning, standing by your desk on a Thursday afternoon, telling you about his marriage. You didn't ask. You never ask. Something in them just decides you're safe. You've wondered if it's a burden. Some days it is. But listen to what's actually happening. They're recognizing something. They can't name it either. They just know that when they stand near you, the pressure comes off their chest for a minute. The third thing, you can feel a room the second you walk into it. Before anyone speaks, before a single word. You know if there was an argument in here 20 minutes ago. You know who's pretending. You know when the smile on the face doesn't match what's behind the face. You've walked into a family dinner and known, before you sat down, that something had happened. And later, days later, weeks later, you found out you were right. And everyone acted like you'd guessed. You didn't guess. There's a man in my life, I'll call him Ray, because that isn't his name, and he'd never forgive me if I used the real one. Ray works second shift at a warehouse outside of Toledo. Forklift, concrete floors. Fluorescent lights that hum so loud you stop hearing them after the first week. Ray told me once that he can tell, from across the floor, which of his guys is having a bad night. Not by their face, they're wearing masks and hearing protection. He can barely see their faces. He just knows. He'll walk over on his break with 2 coffees and stand there not saying anything. And 9 times out of 10, the man will start talking. He said to me, "George, I don't know why I do that. It's not my job. Nobody asked me." And I said, "Ray, do you understand that you've been placed in that building?" He laughed at me. He said, "I've been placed there by my mortgage." But 2 weeks later, he called me back. One of his guys had been planning to end things. Had it worked out, had the day picked. And what stopped him, what he told Ray in a stairwell at 1 in the morning, was that somebody had brought him a coffee, for no reason, and stood there, and didn't ask him anything. That's a warehouse in Ohio. That's not a pulpit. That's not a stage. That's a man with a forklift license who could feel a room. You have that. You've always had that. And you've probably been calling it a personality quirk your entire life. Now let me put an image in front of you, because I'm going to keep coming back to it, and I want you to hold it the whole way through. Have you ever seen a root grow under a stone? Not around it. Under it. There's a slab of rock in a field. Dead weight. Been sitting there for years. And somewhere beneath it, in the dark, a root is working. Slow, silent, no one watching, no one applauding. It doesn't have room, and it doesn't have light, and it doesn't have any reason to believe it's going to make it. And then one spring, the stone shifts. Not because the root got violent, because it got deep, because it kept working in the place where nobody could see it. That's the picture. Hold on to it, because I'm about to tell you something you're not going to like. The pressure you've been under was never punishment. It was the stone. And you've been the root the whole time. Layer 2. What's underneath all right? Down we go. Because here's what most people miss. They think the sensitivity, the openness, the perception, that's the gift. It's not. Those are symptoms. Something deeper is producing them. The 4th thing you sensed. You keep getting placed in rooms where you don't belong. New job, and within a month you're the one people come to. A church you visited once, and somehow you're in the back office, praying with someone you just met. A family crisis, not even your side of the family, and you're the one holding it together. You've asked yourself why? Why me? I didn't sign up for this. I'm not qualified for this. You weren't put there because you were qualified. You were put there because you were carrying something the room needed. And you're going to find, over and over in your life, that the placement comes before the readiness. Every single time. The 5th thing, the silence hits you harder than it hits other people. Other folks put on music the second they get in the car. You've driven home in complete silence more than once. And it wasn't emptiness. Something was in it. Something was speaking, or almost speaking, and you didn't want to cover it with noise. I want to tell you about a woman. Not a modern woman, an old one, from a very old story. There was a woman named Hannah, and her whole life, the thing she wanted most was the thing she couldn't have. Year after year. And it wasn't just the ache, it was that the ache had witnesses. She had a rival in her own house, who reminded her of it, sharpened it, made sure the wound stayed open. So one day she went up to the house of the Lord, and she prayed. But here's the detail that gets me every time. She prayed without sound. Her lips moved, and nothing came out. And Eli, the priest, the man whose entire job was reading the spiritual condition of people, looked at her and thought she was drunk. Think about that for a second. The most sincere prayer in the room. The deepest one. The one that heaven actually answered, and the professional looked at it and got it completely wrong. Have you ever had that happen to you? Where the thing that was most real in you was the thing people most misread? That's not a coincidence in your life. That's a pattern. And Hannah's the proof. It's an old pattern. The sixth thing. You carry other people's weight and don't know how to put it down. Someone tells you their trouble on a Tuesday and you're still carrying it Friday. You pray for people who've long since forgotten they asked. You wake up at 3 in the morning with a name on your heart and no idea why. This one wears you out. I know it does. And I'm not going to tell you it's easy or that you should just learn to shut it off, because you can't. And pretending you can is how a lot of people burn out. But I will tell you this. Intercession is not a mood. It's an assignment. You are being handed weight because your shoulders were built for it. And because somewhere, someone needed a person who would carry it without being asked. The root under the stone doesn't complain about the stone. It just keeps going down. The seventh thing. You've been through seasons where God went quiet, and you didn't leave. That's the one I want to sit with. Because everybody talks about the mountaintop. Nobody wants to talk about the stretch, where you prayed and got nothing back. Where you showed up to church and felt nothing. Where you read the words on the page, and they were just words. And you stayed anyway. You want to know what that is? That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's the deepest thing in this entire message. Anybody can follow God when He's talking. It costs nothing to be faithful in a season of answers. But the person who keeps showing up when the sky is closed, that person has something in them that cannot be taught, cannot be faked, and cannot be manufactured by any amount of religious effort. Hannah stood in that house and prayed with no sound coming out. She got no immediate answer. She got accused. And then she got up, and Scripture says her face was no longer sad. Nothing had changed yet. Nothing external. Not one circumstance had moved. But something in her had settled. That's the moment I want you to find in your own story. Because I promise you, it's there. There was a night, you know the one, where nothing got fixed. But something in you stopped fighting. And you've never been the same since, even though you couldn't explain to anyone what happened. I sat with a woman once in a kitchen at 4:30 in the morning. Her husband was upstairs, still asleep, and she'd been down there since 2 because she couldn't lie there anymore. The coffee maker hadn't even been turned on. She was just sitting at the table in the dark, with her hands wrapped around a cold mug from the night before. She said to me, "I don't think he hears me." I asked her how long she'd been praying about it. 6 years, she said. And I said, and I want to be careful with this, because it's not a clever answer. It's just what came out, I said. 6 years of praying to somebody you don't think is listening is not the behavior of a woman without faith. That's the behavior of a woman with more faith than she's giving herself credit for. You don't spend 6 years talking to an empty room. Not really. Something in you knows better. Even when your mind has given up on the argument. The knees keep going down after the head has quit. She didn't say anything. But she got up and turned the coffee maker on. And I understood that as the answer. That's what I mean. That's the seventh thing. Not victory. Not resolution. Just the stubborn, unglamorous, unwitnessed act of showing up again, which is exactly what a root does. Every single day, in the dark, with a stone on top of it. I want to stop right here for a second, because I need to say something. And this is the honest place to say it. For years I thought what I was carrying was a problem to be solved. I went looking for the fix. I read everything. I asked everyone. I kept waiting for somebody to hand me the instruction manual for the way I was made. Nobody had one. And I eventually understood why. It isn't the kind of thing that gets handed to you casually. It gets uncovered. layer by layer, the way you're uncovering it right now. What you just experienced was not content. It was a mirror. And mirrors demand a decision. If you are ready to go to the root to finally understand why you think, feel, and perceive differently from everyone around you, the secret protocol carries the 7 keys that reveal what God placed inside you before you ever drew your first breath. Full audiobook included for every moment of your day. Plus, the Awakening Map, as a bonus, the 5 stages of spiritual awakening, mapped with clarity, showing where you are right now and what the Spirit is releasing in this season. Link pinned in the first comment. Not for much longer. And you did not make it to the end without a reason. Layer 3. What God was doing the whole time, now we go all the way down. This is the part almost nobody reaches, because you have to survive the first 2 layers before this one makes any sense. The 8th thing you sensed. Every closed door in your life was aimed. I want you to be careful with that sentence, because it's easy to hear it wrong. I'm not telling you every bad thing was God's idea. I'm not telling you the pain was a gift. Some of what happened to you was just the world being the world, and some of it was people making choices they'll answer for. What I'm telling you is that nothing was wasted. Think about the timeline. Think about the job you didn't get, and where you'd be right now if you had. Think about the relationship that ended, and how sure you were that it was the end of everything. And then look at what grew in the space it left. Think about the door you pounded on for 2 years that never opened, and the one that opened later without you even knocking. You could not see the design from inside it. Nobody can. The root under the stone has no idea it's being shaped by the pressure. It just knows it's dark, and there's weight, and there's nowhere to go but down. Down was the point. The 9th thing. You have always felt like your real life hadn't started yet. This is the one that's hardest to say out loud, because it sounds ungrateful. You have a life. You have people who love you. You have things to be thankful for, and you are thankful. And still, underneath all of it, a quiet, persistent sense that this isn't it, that something is coming, that you're standing in a hallway and not a room. You've tried to talk yourself out of it. You've called it restlessness. You've called it discontent. You've wondered if it's a spiritual problem, if you should be more present, more satisfied, more here. Let me tell you what I believe it is. It's not discontent. It's memory. Something in you remembers being assigned. Something in you knows there was a conversation about your life before your life started, and you've been trying to get back to the terms of that conversation ever since. That ache isn't a malfunction. It's the compass still working. Hannah didn't want a child the way people want things. She wanted the child she'd been shown. And when he came, she gave him back. She walked him up to the house of God and left him there. Because she'd always known he wasn't hers to keep. She was never trying to fill a hole. She was trying to complete an assignment. That's the difference between wanting something and being called to something. And you felt that difference your whole life, even when you didn't have language for it. And I want you to notice something about how her story actually worked. Because I think we tell it wrong. We tell it like she prayed and got what she asked for. Clean transaction. Ask, receive. But that's not the shape of it at all. She'd been praying for years before that day in the temple. Years. The same prayer. The same ache. The same house. The same rival sitting across the table from her at every meal, reminding her of what she didn't have. What changed wasn't the prayer. She'd prayed it 1,000 times. What changed was that she brought it to the one place where she had no control over the outcome, and she left it there. She stopped negotiating. She made a vow that gave away in advance the very thing she was asking for. And the moment she stopped trying to hold it, it came. I don't fully understand that. I've turned it over for years and I still don't have it clean. But I know it's true, because I've watched it happen in living rooms and hospital hallways and parking lots outside of churches. The thing loosens when the grip does. If you've been white-knuckling something, a plan, a person, an outcome, a version of your life you decided on at 19 and have been dragging behind you ever since, that might be the stone. Not your circumstances, your grip. And the root doesn't grip anything. It reaches. So let's pull it together. 9 things. 9 signals you picked up before you had the vocabulary to describe them. You feel too much. People open up to you. You read rooms. You get placed in situations you didn't ask for. Silence speaks to you. You carry weight that isn't yours. You survived God's quiet season without walking away. Your closed doors were aimed. And you have never been able to shake the feeling that your real life is still ahead of you. Every one of those, on the surface, looks like a difficulty. That's layer 1. That's what the world sees, and what the world tells you to fix. Underneath, every one of them is a function. That's layer 2. Not a bug in the system, the system. And underneath that layer 3, every one of them is evidence. Evidence that you were not assembled by accident. Evidence that there was intention behind the way you were made. And that the intention had a purpose attached to it. And that the purpose is still standing. Still waiting. Still unfulfilled, but not expired. I want to say one more thing about the stone. Because I've talked to a lot of people who hear this kind of message and immediately want the stone gone. Okay, George, if I'm the root, then get this rock off me. And I understand it. I've prayed that prayer myself, more times than I can count, in more desperate language than I'd want repeated. But here's what I've come to believe. The root that grows in open soil grows fast and shallow. It has no reason to go deep. Everything it needs is right there at the surface. And then the first real drought comes. And it dies, because it never had to learn how to reach. The root under the stone learns something the other one never will. It learns that the only direction that leads to water is down. It learns patience that isn't performed. It learns to work in the dark without applause, and without reassurance, and without any evidence that the work is even accomplishing anything. And then, one day the stone moves. Not because someone came and lifted it. Because the thing growing underneath it finally became larger than the thing pressing on it. That's you. That's where you are. And if you're in a season right now where you feel buried, where you're doing the work and nobody sees, where you're praying and the sky is quiet, where you're being faithful in a room where faithfulness gets no reward, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not stuck. You are rooting. There is a difference, and the difference is everything. Stuck means the story stopped. Rooting means the story is happening in a place your eyes can't reach, on a timeline you didn't set, at a depth you never would have chosen for yourself. And I'd rather be rooting in the dark than blooming in soil that can't hold me through a dry summer. So would you, if you could see the whole field. You just can't see it yet, and neither can I, and that's the arrangement we're living under. Hannah went up to that house with nothing. No child, no answer, no evidence, no reason for hope beyond a stubborn refusal to stop asking. She prayed silently and got mistaken for a drunk. She went home to the same house, the same rival, the same empty arms. And within a year she was holding the boy who would grow up to anoint kings. She didn't know that in the temple. She couldn't have known. All she had was the prayer, and the silence, and the willingness to keep coming back. That's all you have some days too. And I'm telling you, it's enough. It's always been enough. It was enough for her, and the whole trajectory of a nation turned on it. Now I want to hear from you, and I want to be specific about it. Because I'm not looking for a general response. Of the 9, one of them landed harder than the others. You felt it. There was a moment in this video where something in your chest moved, and you thought, that one. That's the one I've never been able to explain to anybody. Tell me which number it was, and then tell me the memory it brought up, the actual moment, the room you were in, the year, the thing that happened right before or right after. Don't summarize it. Tell me the detail you've never told anyone, the small one, the one that seems too specific to matter. I read these, and I'll tell you why it matters. Somebody else is going to scroll down and find your comment, and realize for the first time in their life that they're not the only one. That's not a small thing. That's a stone shifting for someone who thought it never would. The root doesn't know when the stone will move. It just knows which direction is down, and it keeps going. Keep going.